Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 10 Questions About Cloud podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. I worked together with him, and he is really a cloud enthusiast, and most important, a very good person. Welcome, Timur.
Hello.
So, I always use the first question to introduce yourself, basically who you are and what you do.
All right. So my name is Timur Bublik. I'm originally from Kazakhstan. I live in Berlin, and I'm working as a cloud architect for a company called Cloud that is originally from Finland, but is having many branches across Europe, including the one in Munich. And yeah, we were colleagues with Pablo for a couple of years. And there I'm working on different projects for customers, implementing and designing different solutions, cloud-based, in AWS, GCP. We also have some Azure projects. I'm not necessarily working with Azure, but yeah, we have different things cloud-related.
Cool, really interesting. I'm curious now about your cloud journey. Maybe you can tell us about your first steps towards the cloud?
My first steps were, when I was studying at university, I applied for a student job, which was then also my internship and master thesis in a small startup in Karlsruhe. And my job there was to implement a highly available cloud infrastructure. And I had basically choice of any sort of tools, whatever was working better for this particular use case. And we had we were choosing between AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and even IBM Bluemix, which I think not known very much these days. Maybe it doesn't even exist anymore, but 4 or 5 years ago, it still was something promising, more or less, but still in the beta version. And yeah, that's when I tried working with AWS, taking certain services to complement to whatever infrastructure we already had there to make it highly available. Right. All of this was working on thing that is also not very known these days, but was pretty cool in 2016, which is a Rancher. It's a sort of orchestrator. So you can kind of deploy different Docker orchestration tools like Kubernetes or Docker Swarm, and they also had their own orchestrator. So it was sort of a meta orchestrator. It was a pretty interesting thing, and yeah, that was the start of my cloud journey.
Cool, really interesting. What's your opinion about the biggest advantages of the cloud, and why would you recommend a company to migrate to the cloud?
Well, from my perspective, those biggest advantages are, well, I could say cost, but it's not always true. It really depends on what services you use, how much did you invest in your infrastructure, how much for the running costs and stuff like that. But it's the flexibility that you can just get up and running in a couple of minutes. You just create your cloud, whatever AWS or GCP account, and you can basically start deploying stuff. You don't have to order, wait a month, then you get your hardware, you get your hands on to assemble that stuff. Well, no. That's the biggest advantage, I would say. Also, yeah, you also think less about stuff like reliability, availability, networking, and this is all these things that is taken by the provider. They take care of it, which is also pretty nice for me. Then you can basically concentrate on this thing that is most important for you, your business, and how you can improve or leverage your business with your digital tools or applications that you build and eventually deploy in cloud.
Yeah, I totally agree that flexibility is one of the key factors. There are also a lot of them, as you already said, like flexibility, reliability, availability, or elasticity, even very important for cost savings. But yeah, let's continue with another question. It's that I personally believe that cloud computing knowledge is going to be a standard over the coming years for almost any job. Pretty much like knowing Microsoft Word or Excel. What do you think about that?
I mean, by any job, do you mean any technical job or any job in a company?
Yeah, any job, technical, of course, like software development. Yeah.
Well, there are still a lot of companies that are not in the cloud and that are still not going to be in the cloud in any foreseeable future. That's why there are companies like VMware still exist and even thrive. They have a certain market share, about 9 or 10%, I think. I'm not sure about it. And this market share is going to be there because there are still regulations around in every country. Let's say in Germany, they have certain regulations that you cannot store certain information in the cloud. And these people will, or these companies will still have to rely on their own infrastructure. And for those companies, knowing cloud probably won't make much sense. I mean, it's still good to know what you can or could potentially use to maybe integrate partially, make some hybrid infrastructure. It's good to know, but must-haves not for every company. But in a company that is already in the cloud, yeah, I would say that pretty much every technical person should know about those tools that you have in cloud, because then you can operate them more efficiently. Yeah, you can always rely on your DevOps team, but there are not always the possibility to build a DevOps team in a company, and you should not always rely on those people. It's better that everyone knows something to have a cloud infrastructure running efficiently, not doing obvious mistakes and misusing the services there are in the cloud.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. I mean, you touch really good points. And yeah. So another question is related to which cloud provider to use. What are the key factors you consider when choosing a cloud provider?
Do you mean which cloud providers do I use personally or in business?
No, in business, which will you recommend? Of course, depending on the use case. That's what I will say if I will get this question.
Of course, it always depends on the use case, on the branch you are, on the technologies you use. Obviously, when you deal with, I don't know, .NET Core applications that are something tightly integrated with Office 365 or something, then go take Azure. If you're really gonna deep dive into the AI or Kubernetes containers, then maybe Google is your thing. And then for default option, you'll just go for AWS because it's more or less versatile for everything. But if you need something really specific, you go into the other two, or maybe further ones, like also the Alibaba Cloud. They're also quite specific for certain use cases, which we will probably touch a bit later. And yeah, I personally worked more or less with all three of them. I have biggest experience in AWS, but I also did small projects in Azure and touched the GCP a little. I liked certain things in each of those, but just because of the nature of my position, I'm just more leaning into AWS. But probably I would also like any other one if I would work long enough with it.
A very good answer, actually. You touch really good points. And I also share your opinion, to be honest. So you already mentioned hybrid cloud before, also even multi-cloud. which basically has become really trendy in the last years. What's your opinion about multi-cloud approaches?
So do you really mean like, should a company do multi-cloud, and if yes, then when? Or
basically, would you recommend a multi-cloud ecosystem, or do you see in the future like there is going to be a lot of companies using a multi-cloud approaches?
it's definitely not the thing for every company. I mean, if you have 20 EC2 instances or 10 EC2 instances running, and this is whole your infrastructure, then you don't need multi-cloud. Although when it's that simple and you just need VMs, then it could make sense. Then you have more let's say, flexibility, more sort of protection from bad things that could happen to you or to your provider. But even on this simple level, if you say, hey, I just want to run VMs in 3 or 4 different cloud providers, even at this level, you already increase the complexity of managing all of that tremendously, because all of them have different APIs, different approaches to spinning up VMs. And yeah, if you can manage it, good, but the bigger you become then, and the more complex your infrastructure is, the more difficult it's going to be, or I would say almost impossible it's going to be to manage something that would have serverless here, databases there, I don't know, messaging here, and it's just going to be so much difficult. I would say you should probably do multi-cloud when you really reach the limits of your current cloud provider. For example, if you have AWS Lambda functions not really meeting your expectations, and then you have Azure functions that are doing just the thing that you want to do, then just go and take it. You need to deliver your thing at your best and to meet your requirements. But if you just say, hey, well, why not using Azure functions just because, then you're not really getting much, but also losing a lot because of this complexity that you introduce. There are also some companies that are doing that in order to protect themselves from situations that you're, for example, running in GCP and you're in marketing business, and maybe somehow you are incompetent, like competing with Google in certain business, and then you're afraid that they will shut you down. And then in these cases, people are also going into multiple other cloud providers just to be safe that your account not going to be closed one day and you're going to be offline.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there are also situations that no, actually, that would be it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, you already share a lot of good points, which could add a lot of, I don't know, maybe value to the listeners, so to say. So, but we are talking all the time about AWS, Asia, Google Cloud. So there are a lot of players in this market share regarding the cloud. How do you think this is going to look like in the future?
Well, I would say that, so we have basically, of course, those 3 hyperscalers, but we also have 5 or 10 other minor cloud providers. Mm-hmm. And what I believe is that more or less the things are gonna stay the same, because the cloud market is getting more and more mature these days. And I don't think that Google is gonna accidentally become #1 in 5 years, or that AWS will go out of market in 5 years. I just think that there are always a certain niche, and those niches are taking. Unless there are going to be a player that is going to be aggressive to take several other niches of other players. Let's say if there are, I don't know, Tencent or Alibaba or whatever is coming and saying, hey, I want to take the place of AWS, then everything could change. But this is such an aggressive, let's say, battle would be that it's yeah, you cannot predict. But if it will happen, then yes, everything is going to change. Then we will see that either the number one is going to go out, or the companies that are trying to take this place are going out of business because they are going to burn all this money if they will not succeed.
Yeah, I also share your opinion that the things are not going to change that fast. However, in my opinion, things are going to change, but let's see in which direction.
Yeah, I mean, if a company like AWS is going to start doing mistakes, moving in a wrong direction, not accepting new technologies or accepting the wrong technologies, then it's going to, change its position in the market.
Yeah, maybe they stuck.
Yeah, or if they suck. So it all depends on if the companies are going to maintain the pace and the vision they have right now. Because if not, then yeah, things are going to change definitely.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So let's change the topic a little bit. During the last couple of years, we have seen how fast the Chinese cloud market is growing. Last year increased more than 63%, so becoming the second biggest cloud market in the world. So how do you expect this to evolve in coming years?
So I definitely think it's going to grow further. China is going through certain digital, not revolution maybe, but through bursting phase of digitalization. There are more and more Chinese businesses that are cloud first, or they are just completely in IT business. It's not anymore just in industrial country that is just producing things for the other world. They're also now doing the innovations, and these innovations will also require a place to run somewhere. And this place is inevitably going to be a Chinese cloud provider, because the government is protecting their own players from the outside world, such as the European or American providers. And then when they are mature enough, they are normally exporting these technologies outside. And maybe if the Chinese government will become a little bit more open to those providers from the West, let's say, in this case, the Chinese cloud providers could get certain competition, but I definitely think they are going to grow the most in China for the next years to come. I'm not sure about what's going to happen outside of China with those cloud providers, but I think it's also not the scope of this question.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Really interesting answer. Really think that you touch really important points, and of course, the Chinese market is always kind of complex. Since you already said it's a closed market and it's really protected. But yeah, I'm happy with your answer. So could you share with us what was one of the last things that you learned about cloud? It can be just a technical topic or a tool or whatever you want to share with us.
I would say recently I'm working on a project inside NordCloud for a customer, and there was the point where I needed to come to a certain, let's say, application owner inside of in the project of the customer, and there I had to touch things they already have deployed to improve them. And the customer was using the tool that I never worked before with, which is the Terragrant. And Terragrant is an open source tool that is more or less sort of an higher abstraction over Terraform that lets you to write Terraform code a little bit more efficiently, to not repeat yourself, to manage your code from more or less, let's say, from one directory, not jumping between the modules and folders and stuff like that. I mean, this thing is quite powerful. There are a lot of very nice features, but it also brings more complexity. And if this tool is not used correctly, then it's gonna make things much worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more or less the point. Very nice tool, but must be used carefully.
Okay, good point. So time flies. We are already on the last question. So you already know that there is a lot of information out there about cloud. Sometimes it's kind of hard or difficult to choose which information to use and which not. Could you share with us which sources do you use to keep yourself up to date?
Well, because I work mostly with AWS, then my first source is the AWS blog and AWS news. I consume them through a open Telegram. I think it's a group or bot or something. So they repost everything from AWS news and blog posts, and they just can scroll through them and read them. That's pretty nice because Telegram is just on my smartphone. I don't need anything extra. Mm-hmm. Besides that, I'm occasionally on the dev.to website where everyone can write their own posts about all technology they have. It's an amazing community, first of all. There are a lot of stuff as well for the people that are just coming into the IT or into the software and cloud. But this community is very supportive. They are they're respectful. It's a very nice experience to be part of it. And sometimes, occasionally, I think I'm also subscribed to the Medium.com newsletter about AWS and Terraform, where I get stuff, but I'm not really reading it that often because I'm trying to also not consume too much. But those things would be the major ones. And also we, in NordCloud, we operate in Slack, and there we have certain Slack channels where people just share the links and share their knowledge. And as well in our team of cloud architects, we have weekly calls where we also share some new interesting topics. I think this week we were talking about running FPGAs in cloud, and something really narrow but very interesting. So that would be most important sources of information for me.
Wow, really interesting. I also use other sources, but yeah, I really like yours. Very informative. So that was it. We are done, basically. Thank you very much for your time and for participating. It's been a pleasure for me having you. I will leave your social networks in the description in case someone wants to contact you. And thank you very much again, and see you in the next podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It was very as well pleasure for me to meet you again. And yeah, see you later, hopefully.